When is the start of the Zodiac? I'm Janan Derso, and I'm here to question Aries. The traditional cycle of the main zodiac constellations begin with fire. All birth begins with being a baby. Such is the youngest version or pattern of expression when we bring the elements into a time continuum of growth. In the constellation cosmology sequence, after fire comes earth, then air, and finally water, which repeats 2 more times until full maturation. Fair enough. But what about the initial thought of conception? These next two traditions don't start with fire, they recognize that something precedes the physical sign of life as fire. What do you think? So in Taoism, the creation cycle of the elements begins with wood. Wood creates fire. Wood, full of spaciousness and tiny holes, home to the many, while representing the one, tree of life. In this example, I make the analogy that wood is synonymous with ether and holds the beginning of a cycle's spaciousness. The Taoist cycle continues as fire creates earth, earth creates metal, metal creates water, and water creates wood again. Another story from a colleague, Pomo Vazoni, which comes from a specific African people known as the Dagara tradition, their element sequence starts with the unnameable. For the sake of the story, I'm going to call it ether. Then the spark of fire. Next, fire collides with water. They meet and cool to become mineral. This forms the bones of the earth, which ferments and metabolizes into soil and nature. Earth is below ground and nature is above. Air cannot be contained and is the holy breath. Did you notice the similarities? I did. And this pattern in origin stories, of which there are many, led me to question the zodiac sequence beginning with Aries. If Aries symbolically represents the new life, something happens before the baby is born. Everybody knows this fact. Conception and the state of mind during this sacred union is a significant pattern that establishes a layer of consciousness and connection. I see the element sequence symbolically starting as a celestial ring of ether, a cosmic sound that was then released out into the blazing fire of the universe. The conception of creation by the Most High has been articulated in various traditions, and for thousands of years at least, people have looked up to the sky with their questions, praying for answers. And whether you have found these in the heavens or not, you are potentially searching. And I wasn't satisfied with the Big Bang Theory. I know from my own journey, life began with the thought of conception, and so did my children's. Everything does, even a project. So why, if the zodiac is meant to illustrate allegory, would the zodiac constellation symbols begin with fire and not conception? I did my research through seeking what was false. I found a sign yearning to tell its tale. As usual, I began at the end, the tail, more precisely, the tail of the whale. And if it sounds like a good children's book, it is. I've read it to my little ones. A good book satisfies me and lulls them to sleep after a long day, returning us to oneness. So here's the story I believe needs to be written about the whale's tail. The zodiac begins with the ether sign of Cetus, who represents the great whale pod. Each star of this constellation symbolically illuminates an aspect of the individual whale's roles. For example, the tail end of the whale is marked by the brightest star, Beta Theta, or Deneb, which is Arabic for tail of Cetus. It's brighter and larger than the sun, and I consider this the end of the Zodiac series and symbolically representing the father. The head of the whale is therefore the onset. So here it is marked by Menkar or Meneb, Arabic for the nostril, or Alpha Ceti. Because this star is so old, I symbolically see it as the great grandmother whale. Whales are a matrilineal pod of mammals. This star represents the transmission of information from the great source of light to the forward-facing ancestors, the generations to come. The origin as ether speaks volumes to me as we merge the idea of the unnameable into nature, Bridging spirituality and science is at the heart of integration of your daily life lessons with a holy purpose of divinity. And for the sake of this curriculum, ether is the origin element. You may notice a disparity when others explain the start of the zodiac wheel as a fire sign. However, when the constellation Cetus is recognized, the ancient song becomes the etheric start of our collective cycle on Earth. This layer will make even more sense when we place ourselves on the larger map of the cosmos. For now, we can imagine the thought of conception as a symbol of ether. It may be heard more clearly as a song from the sound of the angels' trumpets, calling forth God's creation of love. Perhaps its pattern is formed as the cosmic bell rings when a soul takes place in a womb. Ether is the spaciousness of the shared mind beyond the confines of a brain or a body. It's in everything, while also invisible. This element has many qualities that I can't give poetic justice to, despite the numerous attempts. Suffice it to say, ether is the starting point of it all. And for the purpose of restoring peace in modern times, I have an inherent calling to give ether spaciousness. Ether is more than time for peace. Ether is the symbolic element of prayer and the holy act of remembering prayer. It's the time to pose the questions and listen for the answer to the call from the God of your heart. Ether represents what precedes form. The forming elements show us the form each action holds, so the deed becomes a wholly intentional act, not just a motion of spastic energy. It's the connection of divine thought fluidly transferred into divine motion. Ether demonstrates the act of doing things deliberately, with intention, attention, and on purpose. For clarification, the biodynamic approach does not include ether in the almanac as a distinct element, because it's actually a part of all the elements. Fire has heat ether, seen in this fruit. Air has light ether, seen in the flower. Water has chemical ether, seen in the leaf. And earth has life ether, seen in the root. For our constellations, we have three. This is the ether trinity. We have ether as conception, Cetus's head, the inherent belonging, which I've talked about. Ether as the healer, which is Ophiuchus, the infinite potential of miracles. And then ether as the end, Cetus's tail, the unification, the reunification to oneness. Do Cetus and Ophiuchus influence gardening? Well, although I don't find that they're necessary for plant growth consideration in the biodynamic calendar, I do see them necessary for individual and collective pattern work. They are a deeper layer of Scorpio and Pisces. And if you restore Ophiuchus and Cetus in the constellation rhythm of the moon, it can correlate to the gray timings of no farming action in the biodynamic gardening calendar. God has guided me into the expansion and timings I have articulated, thus honoring these 14 constellations and 5 elements. If you are curious and you want to know more about Cetus, you can follow and subscribe to my channel. I have other videos and a deep study of the sidereal star system, which includes Cetus, in my star map. The links are below. Peace.